to the masterclass. Thank you. Over to Dr. I won't pronounce his surname. I'll just say Dr. Dinos.
Hi. Okay, you can hear me. I'm a friendly guy, so please feel free to ask any questions and we'll have any discussions. I do know South Africa quite well. I'm South African myself, actually. I finished at Springs Boys High School, if you know where Springs is. I don't know if it's called something else now. It used to be called Springs. I studied at Wits University, where I was head of the Water Research Institute as well before I left, and I started this company. So this company is international. We're in 19 different countries, but our roots are here. We still have offices here. We have offices in Johannesburg and in Nelson Mandela. What I'm bringing here is not only expertise international, it's also from South Africa. We have customers in South Africa. Right now we're busy with B2 and Ilembe. And we also have a full team station at Port Elizabeth, Nelson Mandela, doing asset management. So we do have examples, and the private sector as well. Asililu Manzi and Caesar, they all use our technology. So I'm very, very familiar with what's going on in South Africa, and I'll give you examples as well. Where do I point this thing to? It's not moving. Does anybody know how this thing works? Yeah, press it way, point it way. Point it to you. Huh? Put your hand up again. It's not doing anything, my friend. Maybe you can press it from there. No, this machine doesn't like me. Okay, a little bit about the agenda, current challenges facing municipalities. What is asset management? What's the approach we feel is a correct approach to asset management? A little bit about assessment and strategic planning, asset management systems and practices. There I'm also going to have a slide on artificial intelligence because everybody talks about it right now. So I thought I'll put you in the picture in terms of what it really is. Evaluation and improvement, quick wins and overall benefits and summary. These are your current challenges. Emmanuel spoke a little bit about the poor, the aging infrastructure being a major issue. They're all big problems. Poor asset register, I find this to be your biggest problem in South Africa. You think you have an asset register, you think you have a GIS, then we look at that data, we try and convert it into something meaningful, and what we find is a mess. You think you have so many zones, you don't. There's duplicate pipes, lacks of connectivity, all sorts of issues. And without a proper technical asset register, there's not much you can do. Aging infrastructure, we just heard about Durban spending billions to try and sort it out. It's a big thing worldwide. I think the country that has the biggest problem right now is not you, it's the United States. Everything is starting to pack up there as well. And the government is stepping in to spend billions to try and help these municipalities. Low productivity, big issue. Low revenue, commercial losses. I can give you some figures. In South Africa, debt recovery, especially on the water and sanitation sector, is extremely low. It averages about 69%. There's some big municipalities, metros that I know, that are at about 50%. And then you go next door to Swaziland or Lesotho, which when you go there, you think they're backward compared to South Africa. and the debt recovery ratio is close to 100%. Or you go to Silu and Caesar, which is a privately run utility, and the debt recovery ratio is 100%. So there's something wrong there. High water leakage. These two make up what you call non-revenue water, which people keep on referring it as a problem, especially the politicians. It's not a problem. Non-revenue water is not a problem. It's an index. It's an index that reflects upon both the institutional capability of the organization to manage its assets and manage service delivery, and upon the infrastructure, the status of the infrastructure itself. So it's not really a problem, it's just an index. Electricity pumping cost, the big issue. Some of the areas it contributes to a huge percentage of your operational expenses. I know utilities where the electricity bill is much bigger than the salary bill. Poor water quality. Okay, this I won't talk about. Poor water quality as well. You have things in place like the blue drop and the green drop and the no drop, where you're supposed to be putting indices there in terms of showing how you perform. We'll come to that as well. What is asset management? Let's look at historically what is asset management. It started off, in the older days it was repair. Something breaks down, you run around and repair it. And then in the 80s, we started thinking about maintaining things, not just repairing broken things. So we tried to ascertain the condition of certain assets, especially the assets above the ground that we could see them. And based on their condition, we would start maintaining them, and hopefully they wouldn't pack up so easily. And right now, the last 10 or 15 years, we changed to start managing the assets. And what we do is what we call reliability, or a risk-based analysis, where basically we're looking both at the condition and the importance of the asset, and putting those two together, we summarize that as a risk, and we attend to high-risk assets as a matter of priorities. And I said, I was in the IMISA conference in November in South Africa, in Cape Town. And there was a paper on a sewer pipe that packed up, and it polluted the actual water supply of the city in Johannesburg. And I said to the guys, this is a prime example. If you did asset management, it wouldn't have happened. That pipe was a critical pipe, so it was a pipe of a very high importance. It was extremely old, 60, 70 years old. So its condition was deteriorating. So it was what we call a very, very high-risk asset that nobody actually identified it as a high-risk asset to try and address it in terms of maintenance or rehabilitation. So this is what we're doing right now, what we call reliability risk-based asset management. What is asset management? In South Africa, you have this thing of thinking that asset management is all about it's a financial exercise in trying to see how much your asset is worth. It's a lot more nowadays because at the end of the day, people have realized that it's all about service delivery. At the end of the day, we have to deliver a service to citizens. So asset management should be focused towards service delivery. So it has been redefined as an integrated approach to monitoring, operating, maintaining, upgrading, and disposing of assets cost effectively, while at the same time maintaining a desired level of service. And I say desired, and I'll explain that, and improving overall business performance. Because at the end of the day, you have to do this cost effectively as well. You don't have unlimited funds to throw. Now, this definition has highlighted the need of managing assets during their entire life cycle, as shown in the diagram below, all the way from procurement, for operating, for maintaining, for doing rehabilitation, condition assessment, rehabilitation planning, upgrading, and so on. So we have to look at every single aspect of the life of the asset. Now, we find out that in doing this, we have certain conflicting drivers here, which we have to be very careful of. The one is performance, and when we talk about performance, we talk about quantity, which is, say, for example, in water is pressure. If you have enough pressure, they'll get enough water. We're talking about quality, that they get the water of sufficient quality. And we talk about risk. That's risk of failure. How reliable is my supply to those people? And then we talk about the cost associated with that. In performance, there's also another big variable, which is not easily seen in South Africa, but it's a big thing, especially in the rest of Africa. It's a type of connection. And when I say the type of connection, let's talk about water again. We have different types of connections, both in terms of water supply and sanitation. For example, in water supply, you can have a public tap somewhere in the middle of the village, or you can have a yard connection, or you can have a house connection. In terms of sanitation, you can have waterborne sanitation, or you can have pit latrines. There's a very big drive nowadays. It was a big focus in the Uganda conference 2 weeks ago, where I was invited to speak as well, on non-sewer sanitation. It's becoming a very big issue. Excuse me. And thanks God we have people like the Gates Foundation funding efforts in the whole of Africa and Southeast Asia in terms of non-sewer sanitation. By the way, if any of your cities have a big issue with non-sewer sanitation, please speak to me. I have an agreement with the Gates Foundation. We're working together. We can introduce you into their programs, and they do a lot of funding in Africa in terms of non-sewer sanitation. Now, the approach to this, we have a procedure for transforming the municipality or the utility, a framework for asset management practices, and the tools that you need to be able to do that. It includes 3 stages. The first stage is what we call assessment and strategic planning. The second stage is the big stage where you have to implement asset management systems and practices. And the third stage is where you have to implement an evaluation improvement system. So you have to evaluate the problem, you have to build up, put the right tools and build up capacity within the municipality to manage the problem, and then you have to be able to monitor and see what's going on so you can take corrective action when it all goes wrong, or for continuous improvement. Let's start with the first stage. I'm not going to spend too much time on the first stage. We have what we call the asset management framework. I'm not going to talk too much about ISO standards or frameworks or definitions. I don't want to bore you with that. I want to talk more about the substance of things. We have a policy. People that make regulations in this country can focus and have one common policy for all municipalities. You don't need your individual policy. It's something that defines the objectives, the expectations, the activities and behaviors that will be used to guide the application of asset management across the whole organization. And then we have levels of service goals. That's very important. It must be something that is attainable, measurable, realistic. And I mentioned levels of service a bit earlier. I'll say a little bit more because it is important. At the AMISA conference I was last November, people kept on saying about delivering top this, top this, top that. It doesn't always work like that. It's not about delivering something that is top. That can be a very, very expensive way of doing things. You want to deliver something that is acceptable, good, people are happy with, and it's affordable. So service levels are very important. Same things with standards and procedures. We'll come more to that. Type of connection, I spoke earlier about the different types of connections. I spoke a little bit about the reliability of the service. If you want to make a service 100% reliable, that can be very, very expensive. It's the same way in terms of your quality standards. If your quality standards are extremely high, it makes it almost unaffordable to treat the water and to deliver it to the customers. This is one thing that happened in the European Union. They came up with such high quality standards that most of the cities in Europe, including Brussels, could not afford to be able to put them into implementation. So it has to be something affordable and at the same time secure, proper, acceptable service delivery. Okay, I'm not going to go into these slides, too many details, maybe a little bit more for engineers, but what I want to say is that in traditional asset management, you can look at a specific asset on its own and evaluate it, especially if it's visible above the ground, and if it can act on its own. The biggest problem comes with infrastructure. Infrastructure in terms of water, sanitation, electricity, where there's pipes or cables. The one depends upon the other. There's no such thing as performance of a specific asset. It performs. I just showed the interlink of the financial to the technical and commercial. We have commercial management, which is your billing, your customer services, and so on. You have at the center, your asset management, which is your GIS, your data management, your rehabilitation planning. By the way, a lot of people still think that asset management is all about this. It's not. I'll explain it in the next slide. You have your maintenance, you have your operations, you have telemetry and SCADA systems, you have laboratories, you have water quality, you have non-revenue water management, and so on. I'll explain some of these components. And you need something called business intelligence. But what people don't understand, and I've got another talk tomorrow together with Treasury and some other decision makers, and I'll make a few slides tonight for that presentation, that what they don't understand is that there's so many complex business processes within a utility or a municipality. It's not simple. Being a municipal manager must be one of the most complex jobs in the world. There's so many things that he has to understand. And I'll show you a slide later on where it shows these business processes for asset management. And I'll tell you some examples. And this is what I'll tell Treasury tomorrow. Stop having a whip, telling municipalities what you want out of them as an output. If you want to do that, you should also give them some guidelines in terms of how they're going to get there, how they're going to get from A to B. And this is what's wrong here. There's too many incentives about, you do this, I'll give you money. You don't do this, I won't give you money. Have you ever bothered to help these people, to try and tell them how they're going to achieve those goals that you want? Now, to be able to tell them, you yourself have to understand what the line of business is, what's involved within a municipality or a utility. Certain things there that I consider as key in terms of these systems that I think it's a foundation of this changing the organization. You have to conform to best practices. You must meet all the business processes, which I spoke about now, the information requirements, and the current challenges, which I showed in the first slide. There's a lot of those challenges. You have to integrate fully with the financial systems and the billing, as well as telemetry and so on to get information. Your primary asset register when you're dealing with infrastructure is not your financial system. It cannot be. And that's another fallacy that happens in this country. They think they buy software and they have a piece of software called asset management in the financial system, and they think that will suffice as their asset register. It cannot work. Because when you're dealing with infrastructure, you have assets that are geographically located, and they interact with each other in terms of operating. So whatever your register is, it must have geographical location. And it must be able to understand the logic of the infrastructure to be able to help you evaluate and validate that data so you have a correct asset register. So those are key. You have to enable workflows, avoid data duplication. Again, that's one of the biggest problems in South Africa. You go to a municipality, you say to them, show me your connections database. You meet a database, and they tell you which one. What do you mean, which one? There has to be only one. You can't have one different one for the billing department, another different one for the maintenance department. It doesn't work like that. You try and reconcile those two. They never reconcile. They can be out as much as 20%, and then you wonder why you're losing money. So there must be no data duplication. If you have a technical asset register for the infrastructure, for pipes or for cables, whatever, it has to be good enough for everything. You can't have a different one for mapping, a different one for maintenance, a different one for hydraulic modeling, a different one for rehabilitation planning. It must be one. So this department, the GIS department, must be extremely powerful in being able to provide that one database. It must have the right software that it can evaluate that information and make sure that it's correct. I don't think it's correct, what you do have in your municipalities, because I've seen them all. This is the most important diagram you're going to take with you. And if any of you want a copy of this presentation, please speak to Emmanuel or Danny. They'll send you a PDF, so you don't have to take notes, especially of this diagram. This is how you implement asset management step by step, all right? And then this diagram also shows you the workflows that are so critical. At the center of it is your GIS, your data management system. That, as I said, is a system that must serve for all purposes, for financial purposes as well. And I'll explain the links to the financial system. For hydraulic modeling, for whatever. The example I'm going to show is for water and sanitation, but for water basically. But it's a similar, I've got similar models because we have a lot of customers that are municipalities or whatever for electricity and for all other assets. Water is the most complex out of all of them. That's why I'm choosing it as an example, okay? So that's your first step, sort out your GIS and your data management. Second step, put maintenance on it. Already we have an arrow going. We can have routine maintenance. You know, manufacturers say you have to inspect these pumps or maintain them, so on. So we can program into maintenance already some maintenance activity. Then we have to link with our resources. We have to link to stores, and we have to link to human resources to be able to take all our resources to be able to do job costing, or to be not job costing, to be able to do job cards. And all the costing of data goes back into the financial department so they can do budgeting. And we link them to fieldwork management, and so all the records are done with high productivity. So there's no interaction in terms of people coming into the office. They get all their work sent to their tablets or the mobile phones. You have in South Africa, it's very fashionable to have this, what they call ticketing systems. This ticketing system, the only thing that does for you is helps you a little bit in terms of your day-to-day operations. But it doesn't collect information It doesn't collect maintenance records. It doesn't attach them to assets. And those are very important, and you'll see later on why. Through fieldwork, we can do a lot of other things. You can do condition assessment of assets. You can actually do a data capture if you're out in the field and you see something is different to what your tablet is telling you with a map. You can note it, so the asset register can change. Same thing with operational status. So for example, there's a valve that's open or closed. You can change it. You can take logs and metering, like bulk meter readings, for example, goes into operations. Operations can be linked with, with SCADA, or with telemetry, or AMI, or AMR, whatever, all these automatic things out there. And already you can do reactive maintenance and preventive maintenance from that. If you have a failure, you automatically notify maintenance, or you can have triggers. For example, we have a lot of customers that maintain even their vehicles with our thing. If the vehicle has a certain mileage, it can automatically be triggered for maintenance. But this could be a temperature, it could be a pressure, oil pressure, it could be anything that relates to something measurable in some sort of equipment. So this thing should also do production analysis and performance analysis. We do performance analysis of all the pumps, production analysis, boreholes, and so on. It also takes bulk meter readings that go into here, what we call distribution non-revenue water management. Next thing is quality. You need a laboratory, and you need software to manage laboratory, and you need a water quality monitoring and evaluation system. This is something like your green drop, but on a national level. It takes all information. It can take information in terms of field tests coming in directly. Samples go into laboratory, lab tests go in here. It has information with regard to what's located out there and where it's located, so it can do full analysis of what's going on in the system. And that goes for raw water, we actually have a whole country having this system, and they monitor air, they monitor all sorts of stuff through the Department of Environmental and Natural Services. System monitoring is also important for quality. You can detect things that are wrong instead of pollution or whatever, and you can have an emergency response being automatically highlighted. Let's go to the billing side, where the big mess is here as well. What we do is we link to the billing systems. We have a module called commercial data evaluation, which evaluates that and finds all your commercial losses. And then it compiles what we call a commercial rehabilitation plan. For example, when we implemented this in Lusaka recently, I have a problem with more than 10,000 meters that are slow, broken, or not properly functioning. And it doesn't only look at meters, it looks at all sorts of things, connections and whatever. It also, this team takes information from the GIS in terms of zoning, which is done automatically. It does a water balance and a full water audit per DMA. It also comes up with what we call a leakage detection program to follow up leakage. It does full demand analysis, and that can be used for hydraulic modeling purposes. Hydraulic modeling purposes are used for upgrading. I gave you the example of Sol Platy recently, where you could upgrade the whole network with very little money. What are you doing there? You're maximizing the use of your existing assets. You're taking what you have and you're making it work. And this is a big problem, and this is universal, unless you're in a very highly structured society like Singapore or the Netherlands, which are very organized with that, and the networks are working 100%. In the rest of the world, including the United States, which they think they're advanced, but they're not. I've got an office there, so I know what I'm talking about. The networks are a mess, and what we call spaghetti networks. And they have to be sorted out. They have to be made to work properly. And you can do that with very little money. by cutting a pipe here, making a joint here. Very, very little money. What we call that is upgrading. There's also another reason, There's also another reason for doing that. We need to know the replacement type and size of your pipes. Say you have a pipe now, big pipe. It could be a few kilometers long. That's worth a lot of money. That's packed up, it's corroded, it's leaking water, whatever. What do? Do you go and change it? Do you change it with what? Do you actually need it in the first place? When we did Salt Platte, I think I decommissioned more than 20 kilometers of pipes. I said, these pipes are useless. Just decommission them. When I looked at Soweto a few years back, in Soweto, for some reason, during the white rule, in the older days, they kept on giving money to contractors to put in new networks. There was 4 different water supply networks in Soweto. So of course it was leaking like hell. You have 4 the amount of pipes, 4 times the amount of pipes that you needed. So there is a lot of decommissioning to be done when you're sorting out these networks. And by doing this exercise, what I can tell the system is if a pipe is needed or not, and when it does pack up and it has to be replaced, what to replace it with. This is critical because this saves you a lot of money in terms of doing your rehabilitation and your replacement. Now, this is what people understand as asset management planning. But for this thing to work properly, you need a lot of information. The first thing you do is you need maintenance records, which through this system you have the maintenance records. You need replacement types and size, which comes from this. You need the condition, which comes from this. And you need a lot of other information, which is environmental and town planning data. For example, flat lines. Flat lines increase the risk of failure of a pipe. Or for sewer systems, for example, you can have pipes near the rivers or the supplies that are very critical in terms of importance. Or you can have low traffics, for example, extremely important in terms of pipe conditions. Or the location of hospitals or of critical services. Again, they affect the importance of a service of electricity or pipe. So you need all this environmental data, or soil conditions, things like that. So you need all this information built into the system. You can do proper evaluation of both the condition and the importance of an element. Like the example I told you a little bit earlier about Johannesburg, with that pipe that packed up and polluted the raw water supply. You might tell me, how the heck am I going to do all this? Once you have the systems and you're trained, it's not that difficult. Especially if you have a consultant helping you. And I've seen that. I've worked with consultants here. I won't mention their names one by one, but they're very competent people that can help you have put all this in place and have it working. And you do save money. Because just hiring these consultants every 3 years, just to give you this thing here, and this thing they're giving you is actually, it's useful in terms of above ground assets that are visible. It's pretty useless in terms of everything that's under the ground. And that's where the big money is. It's on the infrastructure. It's not on a reservoir or a pump, which is above the ground. And why are they not doing anything to help you? Because in terms of reference of these tenders you go out to, don't ask them to. They don't bother. But they're not stupid. With the right systems, they know how to help you do it. Now this thing, where am I? Okay, this thing has a lot of output. First of all, it does asset valuation, because it knows the condition of the asset, it knows the replacement value of the asset, it knows the effective life of the asset, so it values all your assets one by one. It comes up with a proactive, or some people call it preventive, maintenance plan that goes straight into maintenance in terms of the criticality of the assets and the condition. And it comes up with a full infrastructure rehabilitation plan. This is how Durban should come up with a, what did you say, 10 billion Hopefully they've done it right. Otherwise, out of that 10 billion, the 8 might be wasted. If they've done it this way, then they can put the money in good use. And this thing now links to the financial system. Because in the financial system, in your financial asset register, keeps a grouping of these assets. And you group the information the way they want it. It's not really important what system they use here. What's important is that they tell us, they tell the technical people how they do their groupings. The groupings usually are like this. First of all, they separate electrical from civil and mechanical. Secondly, they might separate things in terms of projects, in terms of areas. Thirdly, they might separate things in terms of type of assets. It doesn't matter how they do it. This asset register has all the information, and it can give it to them the way they want it. We also group valuations, WIP. WIP is work in progress, which is important, because you pay for assets when they're still being built, but you only start depreciating when they're in commission. So you need to know WIP, you need to know disposals, you need to know impairment. It all comes from here. And then the last steps, you get your investment in business planning. You get all this information, your maintenance budget, your rehabilitation plan for the infrastructure, your upgrading plans, your commercial rehabilitation plan, and you start doing investment planning. That's where you start deciding where your money is going to go. And based on that, you start putting projects in place and construct that goes back into the system. We have special, as a company, we have special routines. We actually, our customers give the contractors a template and say to them, this is how I want it, as-built drawings. So they're automatically imported here. And then you need something called business intelligence, where it takes all this information and reports it accordingly per department, per level of seniority. We have, for example, right now, we're working on a business intelligence system for the state regulators of Zambia. They want to put this system plus the billing in all the utilities, and they want it all reported at ministerial level. So the minister will have his own dashboard, lower down different dashboards, so they all know what they want and how they want it. Just very quickly on artificial intelligence. I don't know, do you want me to dwell on that? Should I? Or I'm late, I can leave this slide out. Okay, I wanted to say a little bit about that because everybody talks about it, but maybe I'll talk about it a little bit tomorrow. Unless, if I have questions, I'll come to it. Okay, let's look at these two blocks very quickly, and then I'm finished the manual. I'm sorry, I know I'm taking too long. I have a habit of talking too much. They always accuse me of that. Okay, this is how consultants are going to help now. We have data studies, data evaluation, and desktop editing. Very critical. People think they're going to go out into the field and try and sort those assets. They're wasting their time and their money. You can sort out 90% of the problems at the office if you have a proper system that evaluates it and tells you where the problem is. I remember when our first customer, when we did this, was actually Swaziland. That was more than 30 years ago. You know what they did? They found an old man, he was 96 years old, they brought him into the office. He bloody knew the network inside out. So we sorted out 9 out of 10 of the problems in the office. So this is very important. We're doing this same thing in Grenada now. They're sorting out 95% of the problems in the office. And then whatever is left and it's critical, the system has to tell you what's critical. You go out in the field and you do data validation. This is the only time you go out in the field. You don't go from the beginning. Otherwise, you're going to be running up and down for the next 10 years and get nowhere. Condition assessment, surveys, and analysis. Again, this is something consultants are very good with. Commercial data evaluation and commercial rehabilitation. That can be done with that tool that I explained earlier. So these are your data studies. And then consultants can help up with these two types of studies. This is your rehabilitation plan. This is what they do now anyway. and your preventive maintenance plan. But they're doing it with everything they can see. Now they'll be doing it with a proper validated asset register, with all the information there that is required in terms of the values and conditions. And then they can do infrastructure planning. This upgrading plan I spoke about earlier. A master plan, which you all know what a master plan is. This is for new works, for big expansion works. Emergency response plan. This is something everybody ignores, but it's becoming a big issue. How are you going to respond in terms of a drought? How are you going to respond in terms of a big fire? How are you going to respond A, B, C, D? They're now talking about this environmental change and green change effect and whatever. How are you going to respond to that? So you need consultants can help you with that because they have all the data, they have all the tools. They just have to define certain scenarios and do simulations. And you shut down an outage management plan. That's in terms of making sure that there's very short break in delivery service once in maintaining or something goes wrong in the organization. Okay, I'm going to finish off. I'm not going to say much about this. This is about this dashboard thing I was talking about earlier. Quick wins. I'm not going to go through them. If you get a copy of this, you can go through them yourself. These are very quick wins. Once you start putting a thing like this, within a few months you realize them. And then there's other wins in terms of different areas, improved management, better services, financial benefits. Financial benefits are huge if you put something like this in place, by the way. You know, that debt recovery thing I was telling you about, that changes drastically. High credit worthiness and so on. Just a summary, and I'm finished. Asset management requires an integrated approach, blah, blah, blah. The GIS data management system is extremely important because that's your primary infrastructure asset register. You know, in utilities right now, where I talk a lot to in Africa, they already took the initiative of promoting the IT manager to a director level, because they've realized that the world has changed and how important IT is in them running their organization. So it's a big trend right now. It's happened already in a few African countries, and I was talking to the legislator in Lusaka, in Zambia, and they're also doing that as well. So it's becoming a big issue. And this GIS data management system is the center of everything in infrastructure asset management. So it's very important that it's right. Okay, what else? Capacity building, I said, very important. And studies, that's where consultants can come in. But they can come in using the proper data. Right now, what they're doing is, most of the studies you're getting right now, in terms of asset valuation, I'm sorry to say, is rubbish in, rubbish out, with the exception of a few feasible assets. Okay? I'm done, I'm finished. I apologize for taking so long.